and 7everyminute.com, a podcast and website by, for, and about baby boomers. I'm not sure if the beginning actually happened, so I'll introduce myself again. This is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, a podcast and website by, for, and about baby boomers. Thanks for joining us this evening. Tonight we have a little bit more on personal development, and it's going to be kind of an anecdotal story based upon a recent trip to Mexico I just took. So that brings me first off to an apology for not alerting you, all my followers, that I would be traveling for the past 2 weeks. That the trip is why there was this kind of unexpected break in the lives. I wasn't really planning to not do broadcast. Matter of fact, I was planning to do a lot of things in Mexico, and that's what this is going to be about. But it turned out things changed, but I should have done a quick video to keep you informed. So those of you who wrote me, who are concerned, thank you very much. I apologize to everybody. And lesson learned, we're going to try and do things a little more regularly from now on out. So tonight I'm going to speak a bit about our own self-perceptions and how they affect our reactions to a situation. Basically, I just have to adjust something here. There we go. I was missing the end of my lines. I'll go into this far more deeply in some coming free handouts that I'm working on, as well in the course that I'm working on, 1 Minute to Happiness. But to take some information from Dr. Shannon Irvine, who I've studied with, in her neuro coaching program, that the beginnings of the very basic building blocks of our perception of the world around us are three things. There's situation and stimulus, which is, something happens within our sphere of attention and we notice it. That's situation or stimulus. Then we have the thought. Our brain at some level perceives and acknowledges that the event happened. And then we have a belief. So eventually, if the same situation keeps happening and we keep having the same thought, our brain goes and automates it and turns it into what we call beliefs. Things like it could be almost anything. The leaves are rustling at dusk. That means it's going to rain tomorrow. There are lots and lots of beliefs, some of which are very obvious and maybe a belief like religion or something like that. Some of which are very subtle. It may be things that we just perceive, like every time you hear a creak, a creak like a table creaks or a piece of wood creaks, you think of that, good time you had at the camp with the whole family or whatever. So beliefs are things that where our brain automates things. So this is all part of a bigger framework, and we'll go through this at some point, that has the acronym STEBDAR. And that will be more fully explained in the coming handouts, like I mentioned. But the very short version, to paraphrase the whole concept, is each of us pretty much creates our own reality based upon our beliefs. So I can hear a sound and you can hear a sound, and it could be the same sound, obviously, to both of us. We're standing next to each other. And to me, it makes me very tense because my belief system has associated with something negative. And to you, it brings, joy because you heard a similar sound in a situation. Maybe the creak on the step meant your parents were coming home for the evening and you could go see them and hug them and whatever. So beliefs really shape how our whole world appears to us. And they're very individual. Some are instilled by society. Some are instilled by our family. But ultimately, each person's belief system is unique unto themselves. So the outside world has an influence, obviously, but it's up to us in response to each and every input, which is, some situation or stimulus, to have a particular thought. And if those thoughts occur enough times, like I said, over a given period, we have a belief. And so if you think about that, we've just kind of defined learning and behavior at a very basic level. And certainly at the level of how different cultures work and different societies work and different regions work, because we're influenced by the beliefs of people around us. That's, part of the way we learn our beliefs when we're little and as we get older as well. And so in a particular region, there's certain beliefs, and in another region, they're different. And so it's exactly the same situation as I mentioned before. Same set of stimuluses happen, and each of us perceives it differently and reacts differently. So what's that have to do with my trip to Mexico? Well, the short version is I had very high expectations. I'd planned to interview a number of people for this podcast. I'm on a couple of Facebook groups for Guanajuato, and had planned to post some invitations there for people to be interviewed for the podcast. I plan to work on course development for the upcoming course that I just mentioned, 1 Minute to Happiness. I planned to tour the Guanajuato area of Mexico. It's just a beautiful area. There's a ton of things to do. Wanted to go hiking, wanted to look around, um, all sorts of stuff to do. Visit my family that's down there, work remotely for the day job. Wanted to attend to a bunch of little chores and repairs at the family properties, celebrate the Day of the Dead on November 2nd. I mean, just I had a huge list of things I wanted to do. So what really happened? Very little, it turned out. Um, some of it, a lot of it, actually, was because of my own expectations. Day of the Dead is like kind of a, if you haven't been there, it's a little difficult to describe. It's kind of a combination of Independence Day, Memorial Day, Christmas, and Halloween, and it lasts for like 3 or 4 consecutive days. Basically, it's a celebration of all the people who have passed before you. And it's very different than Halloween, and it's even different than All Saints Day, or All Souls Day, All Saints Day. This is, they very much spend a lot of time uh, truly connecting with the people who passed before them. The more traditional people actually build a little altar per se, and oftentimes have a little paper mat on it, and they'll place the person's favorite meal out, or maybe some of their favorite things. If they like candy, they'll put some candy there. If they like to sew, maybe they put some sewing supplies there, and then they'll have a meal with them, and they'll sit and talk about things and remember the person, and as if they were having a conversation with him about all the good things that happened. And so it's a very special day. It's a very emotional day. There's nothing like it really in the United States that I'm aware of that matches it in terms of sheer emotion. It's different than Thanksgiving. This is connecting with your whole family, present and past. So kind of acknowledging how you got to where you were. It's actually very special. However, it's really very difficult to do anything productive, at least by US standards, other than just spending time with lots of other people engaged in all the festivities, which it turned out was actually very productive by human standards, because not only was productive, it was actually very enjoyable time. And once I adjusted my thoughts and my beliefs and my expectations, I turned what was a tremendous annoyance about not being able to get anything done into celebrating the holiday and thinking about my ancestors and the ancestors of the extended family in a very positive way. So I think, it's really important to notice that something that was truly grating on me turned out to be something very positive only by my adjusting my own thoughts. And so what else kind of derailed my big grandiose plans? There was some family drama going on, which, although it didn't directly include me, was very draining. And more specifically, I let it be very draining. And that was probably my biggest aha moment during the trip. There was nothing going on that directly affected me, like I said, but I let it affect my mood and my actions. And so I hope I finally learned this lesson once and for all, that once I got past that phase about halfway through my visit and just said, that's somebody else's issue. The only thing I can control is my life and how I respond to it. My visit went considerably better. I had a good time. I started doing more things. My mood was better. The situation was the same. The players were the same. Just my reaction to the situation, hence my beliefs, had changed. It was very dramatic because the first part of the trip was quite stressful, and I turned that around completely. And just, if other people wanted to be stressed by it, that was their decision. That was their reaction. I, however, was able to then enjoy my time there, not ignore the people, but give them the grace and the space and the love to go and deal with it as they had to deal with it. And meanwhile, I would go and live my life as I needed to live it. And so what else? There was also a real kind of a real world introduction to the realities of living and working in semi-rural Mexico. Guanajuato has quite a bit of industry nearby. There's auto plants and other manufacturing facilities. So the infrastructure is pretty solid, actually, but it's not rock solid. So here, we all know everyone going totally berserk when the internet flakes out for a few seconds. If you have a dropout, there's a couple of things you can do. And what I started to do was just adjust my expectations and adjust the technology in use. Do you really need to have live video going so you can watch 16 still images on a Zoom call? No. So you just skip the video, call in with your phone and listen to the audio, because that's the only thing really going on anyway in most of the meetings. So again, by changing my thoughts, the rest just kind of fell into line. It was very interesting because there were a couple calls I was on where the audio started to get a little garbled, and instead of immediately trying to see what I could close and everything else. It's kind of like I can still understand what's going on. What's the stress about? And so by changing my thoughts, changing my beliefs, and changing my perceptions, everything else just kind of came together in a nice way. And then finally, and this one was very difficult for me, the general work ethic is in Mexico is quite different than in the U.S. Pretty much everyone I met was generally a very hard worker, and I've seen that here too. If you give someone a task, they'll do it. I mean, they'll work really hard. They'll really bust through and make it happen. You know, plain and simple. However, if external factors mess up the situation, that's where things really change. Because their response is usually very different than here in the US. For example, say a part for something isn't available, you're trying to fix a stove in my case. Then the answer is, okay, we'll finish it another day, right? Some other day. Well, no problem, except that I was leaving in a few days. So like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And it took a real purposeful shift in my perception to accept that things will happen in their own time and not when I can force them through. And honestly, that's kind of how I tend to work here in the US. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a good way to live, but it is how I was. And so it was still my beliefs that were causing me problems. And they were the ones causing me the angst and the trouble and the tension. It wasn't the culture. The culture is what it was. And so I slowed down and kind of stepped back and said, I got a couple of big projects completed. I got some other things started. And now I've learned to take that as just a solid win, right? It's not kind of like, oh, I wish I'd gotten more done. I got some things done that I wanted to. I was really excited about that. And the other things, well, we'll finish them some other day. The projects will still be waiting. And next time I go down, we'll do them that time. And so it brought a lot of peace and joy to the whole trip to realize. And I mean, I taught this for a while and I practiced it in some ways, but here I was in a real world situation that I had, basically very little control over most of the things. I was in a foreign country. It's a different culture. I speak very poor and minimal Spanish, so it's not like I could coerce people to do things by language other than by smiling and trying to be a good chum. And so what that left was basically, if I wanted things to be different, then I had to perceive them differently. It was up to me to make my world into what I needed it or wanted it to be, because the world was what it was. And, I could either be miserable the whole time or I could adapt. And so it was really interesting to see what a huge difference it made, just in over a course of 2 weeks and in a lot of little things, by just changing my attitude and realizing that it was completely up to me as to which path I could follow. I could be tense and angry, or I could be content and joyous with the things that were accomplished. That isn't to say that I didn't strive to do things that I wouldn't have wanted in ideal situations to get more things done. But again, it's a matter of setting expectations. And so now think about how you're living your life now, right now, every day. Are you like me in Mexico at the beginning? And are you letting every little thing cause you stress and anxiety and annoyance? Are you so wrapped up in all the things that are bothering you that you don't even notice the huge elephant in the room of all the joyous things going on around you, all the good things in your life, and all the things that have the potential to be good? Some things that happen could either be taken as a negative or a positive, and it's up to us to see the good in things and to make it happen. Life isn't perfect, but that's true no matter where you are and whatever your situation is. So it's up to each one of us to kind of create the nicest world that we can. We have to start with ourselves and then kind of expand it to our whole current life situation and the people that we work with. It's just that the littlest things that we do can have huge positive impacts on other people. One of the things that I often do, I always try and make it a habit, whoever's checking me out, to notice something about them or give them some compliment or thank them or something. And just that itty bitty thing, you can see their face light up because they've been sitting there for an hour or hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever, since their last break, people going by, treating them like a machine. And somebody just says, wow, I just noticed your sneakers match your jacket. How cool is that? It's like, wow, that person really recognized me as being a person. It's a very small thing, but it makes a huge change. That's true throughout every aspect of our life. we can make changes to how we perceive the world and how other people perceive the world by sharing our joy and enthusiasm with them. So, with every input we receive, we have a thought. We talked about that earlier. And most of those thoughts actually are handled by our subconscious. We don't really actively think about most things that happen. They just happen, and our subconscious kind of runs them through this special filter that we've created. And that filter, which shapes our life, are called our beliefs. Um, that's our key to happiness or our lack of happiness. By changing how we react to those thoughts, by getting control of our beliefs and expectations, we have the power to reshape our entire world into one in which joy is much more common and contentment is available and attainable. So, that really kind of is actually the introduction to the 1 Minute to Happiness course. It really goes through, it's kind of a self education and guided instruction course that goes through how techniques, very specific techniques and methods to help perceive the world in a new and more engaging way, and also to learn how to control your beliefs and open up the power within you. We all do better when our inner beliefs and kind of match up with our heartfelt goals, and there are techniques for doing that. And that's what this course will be going over, and will be a lot more coming on that. But the real kind of short look ahead is we have the power. There are techniques we can use that get our brain to believe things that we want to have happen. This isn't just, oh, I wish something will happen, it'll happen. This is, boy, I wish I could speak more eloquently in public. And there are ways to train our brain to make that so that our brain goes, oh, we want to speak more eloquently in public. So we'll learn ways to do that, as opposed to trying to force yourself through, which is just willpower. That's how dieting is. Dieting is you try and force yourself through, and you can do it for a week or 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks, which is the typical limit, and then things collapse. This is a different technique. This is where our brain pulls us along because our brain realizes what our goals are and helps us move towards them. So stay tuned. There'll be a lot more on that. It's a lot of fun, and it's very satisfying, and we'll have to talk a lot more about it. So that's it for the week. Thank you for stopping by. If you found something interesting or useful, please pass it along. And if not, please drop me a comment as to what you'd like to hear. Have a great week. Thanks so much for visiting. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everybody, and see you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.